All right, everyone. Today we have Greg Slater. He is the CEO of THEA, which stands for Tampa, Hillsborough Expressway Authority. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. So we were just talking about you guys own the Selmon Expressway, and we're discussing the new on-ramp and off-ramp downtown. There's going to be a lot of changes coming soon. And you were mentioning something about pedestrians.
Yeah. If you think about it, so we own the Leroy Selmon Expressway. We also own the Leroy Selmon Greenway, which is the bike and pedestrian facility under the expressway, but also Meridian Avenue and Brandon Parkway. And so we have a lot of parts of our environment that are really pedestrian-rich environments. And so, we have to really rethink. We're doing a lot of rethinking of a lot of our downtown ramps. If you think about that downtown viaduct, which is really like a Hillsborough River over towards Ybor, and the ramps that were there historically, the expressway has been here for 60 years. How much has changed in the downtown environment in the last 60 years? And, even the last 10 years in that downtown environment has kind of created this situation for us where we've got these expressway ramps that are feeding into these dense urban environments. So we have to really do two things. One is rethink, are they in the right location? And two, how do we slow that traffic down before it gets into that dense urban environment? Because I can't just put a stoplight there, or I can't put a stop sign, and we've got to slow it down at the top of the ramp instead of the bottom of the ramp.
So pedestrian safety, right? We were talking before we went live. If you're commuting back home, you want to get home as quick as possible. That's just human nature. But how do you transition someone in that mindset of being on a highway to getting off downtown, and then immediately there's pedestrians and people riding bikes? Like that's a very serious safety concern that needs to be figured out.
It really is. And so, first thing you do is you shift the mindset. So, we own the expressway, but our mindset can't just be the expressway. The people that are using our expressway, where are they coming from, where are they going to? Our organization has got to have this door-to-door mindset where, where are you coming from? How do I transition you into a safe place downtown? And then use the other facilities, whether you're walking or using a scooter or biking or catching a bus or any other type of transportation to get out throughout the city. So if we bring people in from outside into the city and then disperse them throughout for a variety of facilities.
And how did this idea of changing everything came about? Was it all the changes in downtown Tampa? Was it a necessary need to do this?
Sure, absolutely. And so I came in 2 years ago and immediately saw that issue. I'm a planner by trade. Just happened to spend 25 years in the suburbs of Baltimore and DC working transportation issues. And so, I've seen firsthand how those systems can all work together. And so, I immediately saw this densification and then immediately saw, where it was going to be a challenge with some of our ramps and started to rethink the project, started to think about where those ramps were. Our Whiting Street project is a great example of that.
Yeah.
And so 2 years ago, when you look at that project, it came in and it was essentially a new ramp that was going to come down at Whiting, but had this 2 free right turns onto Whiting towards Meridian. So it was an environment where somebody was going to jump off the expressway onto a ramp, just kind of a free flow into it. And so as that property around where the old flour mill used to be starts to densify as it's going to, it creates this pedestrian-rich environment. So we needed to really rethink that.
Yeah.
And so so what we started to do was, okay, well, how can we reconfigure this? Because one, we want to get rid of that ramp 6A, which is that little spur around Amalie Arena. So the original plan had 3 parts to it. So first was eliminate that spur 6A, but then we were going to take that ramp.
So here's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So 6A is that big windy loop that goes around, and then there's another ramp attached to that on the left side that goes directly into the arena.
Right. So
currently,
this is the new plan. So where you see that number 2 is there's currently a ramp that goes straight through and kind of hits that intersection like a 5-legged intersection, kind of on the corner. And when there's an event at the arena or a hockey game, Tampa PD shuts that ramp down.
Right. What's the point?
And so what happens is when that ramp gets shut down, people that are going to the arena have 3 choices. I can go around the loop onto Florida and kind of navigate all that game day traffic and all that event traffic. I can get off on kind of Willow and go across the Platte Bridge. So what we see is the expressway, when that ramp is out of service, the expressway goes down to 7 miles an hour, Platte goes down to 3 miles an hour. It's all backed up through those neighborhoods in South Tampa because they're trying to cross before. Because if they don't, they've got to go all the way to Ybor and double back.
Yeah.
If they're on the expressway.
Now, how are you guys tracking this? Like, how do you know specifics, how fast people are going and where they're going and how they're getting there?
Transportation is a pretty data-rich environment. So, you've got all kinds of data sources. There are pro-based data sources, but on the expressway, they're going through toll gantries.
Okay.
So when they go through toll
you
gantries,
have the license plate, the call, right?
Yeah. So for us, it's just a transponder and a license plate. It's not really a person. So we try to stay out of the personal information. But I know that, hey, a car went through this at 10 miles an hour or 5 miles an hour.
So you're tracking speed. How do you know, though, when people get off of the expressway and they're going down Platte or wherever they're going down or Willow, how do you know that? Is there studies being done?
There are. So studies, we do traffic counts, those types of things. We try to understand as we're doing these projects, we do these really detailed traffic models. We take counts at intersections. We do, you look at things like cell phone data and you try and figure out, okay, what's that density?
I would imagine before you spend maybe $100+ million, you'd want to know exactly what the right thing to do is before you put a shovel in the ground.
Even things like Waze and Google Traffic. They're
Oh,
data sources. So,
Yeah.
they tell us what's there. They tell us if there are incidents. They tell us, those are all data sources that are out there.
Has AI affected this data in any way?
A little bit, but I think there's a lot more to come for that.
Yeah.
Where we're seeing a lot of real promise with AI is, so for instance, let's say you take the expressway.
I know we're on a tangent, but we'll get back to
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm used to those kinds of conversations. We see where they take us. But with AI, so think about an expressway when you're coming off and you're entering an urban environment. There are signal systems, so you can use those signal systems. So I know that the expressway backs up going into town during a Lightning game. 5 years from now, the expressway will know there's a Lightning game, and we'll be able to connect to those signal systems and then readjust the timing on the fly based on what we're seeing in other parts of the system.
Amazing.
And be able to keep that flow. So think about congestion this way. So congestion, for every minute of congestion, it takes 2 minutes to recover. So if you've ever been stuck in a backup of traffic, you get to the front and there's nothing there, you're stuck in the recovery congestion.
Oh.
So what's happening is, so if you can prevent it from breaking down based on things that you're doing miles off the system with signal timing and those types of things through AI, you can prevent the recovery congestion.
Interesting. I hate when that happens. You get to the front of the line, and you're like, what are we all waiting for?
Right.
So that's what it is. It's this delay of traffic. The car in front of you slows down, you have to slow down behind you, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I'll give you a great example. So several years ago, I worked on a project in one of my previous roles where, across the eastern shore of Maryland, there are beaches on the far tip. And so in the summertime, commuters would go down to the beach for the weekends or for the week. So on Sundays and Saturdays, there were two bridges. One was across kind of a Narrows area. The other was the large Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And so it would somewhat get metered. So when that island in between got so locked down in traffic, people couldn't get out of their house. So once Waze came out, once Google Traffic came out, it pushed everybody off the mainline roadway and into the neighborhoods trying to find their way. And so it created traffic problems and frankly safety issues in neighborhoods that weren't there before as people are cutting through. So what we did on that project was we built in sensors on the first bridge and said, okay, as long as we're around 1,500 cars an hour, it never breaks down. So what you do is you put a counter on. And so if I'm at 1,000 cars an hour, the green times over 100 miles are longer. And as you start to get up to 1,500, 1,600 cars an hour, then what happens is I'm adding 45 seconds or a minute on 15 different signals up and down that corridor over 100 miles. You don't feel 45 seconds at a signal. but what you feel is getting stuck in traffic. So you're essentially managing the traffic on that island over a 100-mile stretch of roadway through intelligence.
Right. Everyone's felt that when they've been on a road trip, not even a road trip, but some sort of a commute on a highway, and they go, it's backed up. I know it's going to take a little longer, but I'd rather just take the back roads and sit at stoplights instead of sitting in traffic.
That's right.
Signal timing is probably insanely important. I think we've all too been at like a stoplight at midnight and you're sitting there at a red light and you're looking both ways and there's no cars. That's where I feel like AI would really come in.
It does. You think about the evolution of signals, so historically they were systems that you could time them. You just program them and they ran on cycles. Then you got into signals that you could program, okay, the morning peak is different than the evening peak, which is different than the middle of the day, time them for different parts of the day. Then it moved into these adaptive signals that could say, okay, I can start to build some sensors when traffic is building up, I can extend those green times. Now, as we're starting to evolve from smart sensors, signals to AI, you're able to understand what's happening on other parts of the system many blocks away to be able to adjust this signal to be able to help that flow and that traffic through the whole system, because the system has got to work together.
Or even from a even more macro level, the whole Tampa Bay area. Maybe there's a Rays game and that's affecting traffic moving over the bridge or whatever that would be.
Up until last Friday, the most traffic we ever had on the expressway was about 266,000 transactions that day. And that day included a Rays game in the afternoon, a Lightning game in the evening, and a Taylor Swift concert that night.
200 and how many thousand?
65,000
in one day.
In one day. Gosh. We broke that record last Friday with no events.
Now, how is that possible?
Just
the amount of people that live here now?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
now,
they're coming into town.
That's kind of a scary fact for you guys. Maybe not scary, but daunting, right? You realize, oh my gosh, we're in this insane high growth area. We need to plan for the future and figure this thing out.
Absolutely. So you think about the fact that we're an expressway that's probably about 19 to 20% over where we were projecting pre-COVID. Whoa. And so the last major project that we did was the west extension over Gandy Boulevard. Mm-hmm. That roadway today is now seeing the traffic levels that we predicted at 2030.
Oh my gosh. Which, by the way, that's helped so much. I've actually noticed that. When that was first being built, I thought, that ain't going to do anything. There's no way. But it actually, Gandy Boulevard has a lot less traffic on it.
So we took 50% of the traffic off of Gandy Boulevard and eliminated 40% of the crashes.
Wow.
Because the crashes were congestion related. So what happens when you get really bad congestion is people do stupid things, right? And they make bad choices, and then it creates fender benders and other safety challenges. So eliminating 40% of the crashes on Gandy Boulevard and taking immediately 50% of the traffic off.
I want to bounce into each one of these projects, but first, how did you get involved in the position you're in? How did you become the CEO?
So they found me. They were doing a recruitment for the new executive director. The previous executive director was retiring. They reached out to me. I spoke to them a few times over the course of their recruitment. I had never been to Tampa.
Oh,
and
wow.
so, I came in and loved the city. And my wife is a school counselor, so her job is somewhat portable. So, I was like, hey, do you want to move to Tampa? But
and you were in DC at the time?
So I was working in Maryland. So I spent 25 years in Maryland DOT over the course of my career. So, I started in kind of the survey technology side of the organization. So, let me backtrack before DOT. So I spent, I graduated from college, a small school outside of Baltimore. I'm a Baltimore kid. I'm a kid from West Baltimore, grew up in that region, and then, took a job after college with Baltimore City. Baltimore City had they had a water and sewer system that was getting old, like many urban areas.
Right.
And they needed a better way to track it. So they hired me and another couple of fresh college graduates and a company to come in and essentially remap all their water and sewer systems.
Wow.
And so, we built this, it was a GIS-based system, computer-based modeling system for all the water and sewer systems. And then I walked almost every inch of Baltimore City streets and kind of captured every valve and every fire hydrant and every piece of that system. And then after I finished that job, they recruited me at the DOT. They're saying they're trying to find someone that could implement that same technology and that same system focus. So my mindset has always been about systems. And, I liked traffic more than I liked like water sewer. But traffic to me, transportation for me was really attractive because it had dedicated funding. Other pieces don't have dedicated funding. So transportation has always had dedicated funding. You can argue whether it's enough or not,
right?
But it's always had dedicated funding. So I took a job with the DOT. It was a part of the DOT called the State Highway Administration. Spent a few years kind of implementing those systems there. Then took over a division that was really in charge of a kind of a variety of things. It was construction materials, it was bid lettings, but it was also the new technology, LiDAR, those types of things, which is now what's being used in connected vehicle technology. So I worked on that 25 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Then from that, I moved into a position was the Director of Planning and Capital Programming. So I was responsible to build a $4 billion capital program for the highway side in the middle of the recession in the 2000s. And so, one of the first things I had to do from a real senior leadership level is rebuild a capital program and stretch those dollars and still make progress as a department. From there, I moved into a role where I was overseeing all project development on the highway side. So it was, from planning, the environmental program we had around the Chesapeake Bay watershed and managing the nitrogen and phosphorus. I was overseeing bridge programs as well as our real estate portfolio. And so it was, and the capital program. And then, from there, I was asked to take on a role of a position called the State Highway Administrator, which was essentially in charge of every highway in the state that didn't have a toll on it. The toll authority was a little bit separate, but responsible for operations, winter operations, storms, emergency response, crash response, construction, the whole deal. And I did that for several years before I was approached to take a bigger role. And then my last few years there, I served as the Maryland Secretary of Transportation, where I was overseeing the Port of Baltimore, BWI Airport, the transit system in Baltimore, light rail, metro, bus, Baltimore City school bus system. I was overseeing the highways and the tollways. We have many toll facilities, but also served on the board of the DC Metro system and managed all of their motor vehicle services. Everything your tax collector does today was all under my portfolio.
Oh my gosh.
As secretary, about a $17.5 billion budget, 13,000 employees.
What a job that was
Huge.
At such a high level with all of those massive jobs in themselves.
Yes.
Have you taken coming to a market like this, right, where Tampa maybe is at the very beginning of its extreme, I think we're going to have decades of growth. There's got to be lessons in there of like, hey, we did that the wrong way. Let me move into this job in a different manner.
There's a lot of lessons and a lot of similarities. You think about, part of the challenge that I had as secretary is 2 weeks after I took that job, a global pandemic hit.
Oh, that was bad.
And so, I got cruise terminals and those types of things to imagine.
Right.
But, you think about, there's a couple of things that I'm really kind of carrying with me. One is, how do you stretch every dollar that you do? But also, we have a window to try and get in front of some of this growth that we have to try and take advantage of. And it's not just an expressway system that's going to help us manage this growth. It's the expressway system integrated with the city's network, with the county network, with the state network, with the transit network, with everything all together, including aviation and maritime. We've got freight that's coming in to Port Tampa Bay that we need to facilitate out and move up the I-4 corridor. We've got cruise ships that are coming in, and those 3 cruise ship days that are coming in bring massive amounts of traffic that come in. And so now we've gotten more and more, Tampa International Airport is continuing to grow, and people are, where you think about downtown Tampa is such a destination today that people are just coming in.
Right. And a few years ago, it really wasn't. It was suitcase city. People were going there for their 9-to-5s.
Sure.
Getting ahead of that growth is the key. I don't know. Do you believe there's ever an opportunity for any state level, local level to actually get ahead or catch up to growth? Or are you always going to be behind? Is that just the nature of kind of what you do?
So if I think about it over the course of my career, I think you're always a little bit behind. And that's because the growth moves faster than you're able to deliver transportation projects and the funding that you have available to be able to do those. You've got to stretch those. You're never going to have enough money to do everything you want when you want to do it. So if you use the right data analytics, if you use the right management programs, if you use those types of an approach, then you can try and do the projects first that you think are going to get your greatest bang for your buck.
So a lot of it is budget oriented. Ooh, we shouldn't dump every fund into this particular thing. We need to spread or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's budget oriented from a few different perspectives, and money isn't always the answer because you have to really focus on how do you stretch every dollar that you have. The lessons that I learned managing a capital program and rebuilding a capital program in the recession in the 2000s were the same strategy that I used when we had to cut $2 billion of money in the in the pandemic.
Yeah.
The same thing. How do you bring those down? How do you build more adaptive programs so that you can get the same level of performance for less resources when you need to?
Does the federal government not control all of those highways? I thought the federal government is the one that controls them.
So there's a variety of different pieces, and I'm going to kind of delve outside of
and I know it's
Expressway.
complicated.
There's a federal aid system that includes the interstates and U.S. routes and some of the higher functioning roadways. And so federal aid comes down from U.S. DOT to federal highway to state DOT. And there's a formula there, traffic-based formula. So you see counters on the roadway, average daily traffic, those types of things. And population. So they push that formula down, and Florida gets a formula fund that they have to disperse. Florida's a big state.
Right.
But you've got those investments, but at the end of the day, it's investments at all levels, and it's all got to work together.
Tyler, can you look up real quick? I just saw the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, just granted Atlanta $150-something million to reconnect their downtown street grid. How much of where the dollars go, what particular state they go to, is political? Does it get messy with some of the budgeting and the money?
It can. I mean, so when you look at the infrastructure bill, for instance, that this came out, the IIJA, so I was working at a very high level in the state DOT when that was being debated and when that got passed. And so what that did was it did two things. It created a larger formula of those formula funds, those dedicated funds. So those dedicated funds are critical because they allow you to plan year over year, a decade ahead, and saying, okay, I can count on these dollars for the next 10 years, and you can plan. But it also had a tremendous amount of discretionary grant funds in it. So it's like, they had grants for technology, they had the Reconnecting Communities grants, they had all kinds of different pots of money that had different criteria to meet that you could go after.
Pull up one of those articles because it's really it's an awesome project for Atlanta.
Sure.
Obviously the federal government has recognized, and I think anyone that's driven through Atlanta understands that highway system has really disrupted their walkability, their urban core, and it's awesome they've got funding to kind of turn back the clock and recreate that urban, walkable, connected environment they once had. There was also money that was granted for a light rail system. I think the federal government identified 30 metropolitan areas that they saw rail being implemented in over the next few decades, but Florida and Tampa was not on that list. So that's why I'm thinking, is it political? Like, what are some of the factors at play? Why would we, such a high growth area, be left off a list like that?
Yeah, I'm not certain. I mean, it all comes down to how you apply for those dollars and whether we went after them, whether we had plans that were ready. For the most part,
maybe that's our state's fault. Maybe our state government wasn't planning for that. Maybe they didn't, chase that down.
Yeah, and I think Florida's such a big state that not a lot of that is done at a state level. It's kind of more focused on a local level. But what US DOT is going to look for is, they call it that shovel-ready project, but those shovel-ready projects are ones that have gone through the federal National Environmental Policy Act process, and they've gotten that federal approval. Because the last thing US DOT wants to do is award several $100 million for a project that may get challenged environmentally or may get challenged by a community. They want to make sure that that's all vetted before they invest their money.
So there is a state and local level like due diligence almost that needs to be done before the federal government just says, here's a check.
There is. And there's a local match to those dollars too.
Maybe that was a part of the, it's probably very complicated. I'm sure there's a bunch of reasons. But yeah, I just saw that and I thought, darn, we could use some of those federal dollars. Has THEA or any local areas gotten federal dollars for highways?
Yeah, absolutely. So we built, one of the grants, we've gotten several grants over the years. So the Leroy Selmon Greenway was actually part of the grant that built the Riverwalk.
Oh, wow.
And so we partnered with the city of Tampa, and we had a small piece of that, and we built that Leroy Selmon Greenway. Many people don't realize as well as THEA was one of the 3 pilot sites for implementation of connected autonomous vehicle technology designated by USDOT. So our facility was designated by USDOT as a testing site. So we stood up a successful pilot program where we implemented connected and autonomous vehicle technology all around the city and really showed through data analytics the safety benefits of that technology. Now we're taking that into more of a practice program instead of a pilot program. And so, for instance, we've got a partnership now. So when you look at connected vehicle technology, you've got the vehicle technology, and then you've got what's called an RSU, so a roadside unit. So, a roadside unit, for instance, will have a map of the intersection. It will communicate with your vehicle, it communicate with other pieces of infrastructure.
Wow.
Now we've got a new partnership with this company called THEA, which is essentially an onboard unit that you would get for a vehicle that you can clip onto your briefcase or on your bike or on your scooter, so that if I have a vehicle that has connected vehicle technology and I'm coming up behind a bike, there's a sensor that will go off on that bike that says, hey, there's a car coming up behind you. And there's a sensor that's going off on that car that's saying, slow down, you're approaching someone on a bike.
That's massive. That's
huge.
Massive. Yeah, huge. Yeah, because then you can take antiquated technology like a bicycle, maybe.
Right.
And but implement some AI and technology that almost makes it like an autonomous vehicle in a way.
Absolutely. So there's 3 parts to this. So it's a vehicle to infrastructure technology, which is how my vehicle is communicating with the infrastructure to tell me, hey, this light's going to turn red, and it will stop your car if you're going to run a red light. Then there's vehicle to vehicle technology that will help the vehicles connect to each other, take away some of the human elements of it through a digital connection. And then there's what we're focused on right now in our next phase of our program is called V to X, which is vehicle to everything. So vehicles being able to communicate with scooters and bikes and pedestrians that have that technology built in. Because the more we can take the human element out of it, the safer our system will be.
If you look at traffic fatalities, it's atrocious, really. I mean, I know it's getting better, but it's scary, the amount of people, the amount of deaths on highways and pedestrian deaths and all that. Is that the ultimate goal? I mean, obviously getting people to where they need to go quickly, but is safety always at the forefront?
It has to be.
Yeah.
If you think about safety and the amount of people that lose their lives on the transportation system across the country, it's horrific. And I've sat in living rooms of parents who have lost children. I've been on crash scenes that are horrific. We're very fortunate on the Expressway that we don't have a lot of those safety challenges. But it's also about the system around us and making sure it's safe and people are able to transition on and off the Expressway.
I'm sure that's been looked into. Why has the Selmon Expressway not seen? Why is it safer on the Selmon?
Because safety for the most part. So you have crashes and then you have a number called severity index. So where are the crashes where people are dying and where are the crashes that people are having serious injuries? So, fender benders are one thing. They're somewhat a product of congestion at times, but the real severe accidents are really a result of speed differential. And so, if you have a car that's going 20 and a car that's going 70, that's a challenging situation from a safety perspective, or a car hitting a fixed object. That's why the fine line between someone who's on a bike and a pedestrian is very different. There are no minor fender benders when it comes to a pedestrian. You hit someone, the probabilities go up for, certain fatality the faster you're going.
Yeah, that brings us to what we were talking about in the beginning of the conversation, where the challenge of taking someone who's going 50, 60 miles an hour off of a highway immediately into a downtown.
Right.
I mean, if you think about the distance between you being in the left lane on the Selmon off the ramp onto Franklin, I mean, less than a quarter mile. Like
Less than a quarter
that
mile.
is a quick transition, not only for a vehicle, but also just the human brain.
It
Because
is.
a lot of people on the highway, you're listening to music. Of course, you're not looking for a human being walking around. You're not looking for a pedestrian. There's no pedestrians on the highway, hopefully.
Right, you got a podcast on.
Yeah,
but
you're just not in that world.
you're not, and especially if it's a route that you take every single day.
Right.
Right. But the other thing that we have in Florida is, we have this influx of new residents, not only full time, but this time of year when it's,
Right.
I was on a call with someone who's in New York in the financial markets this morning, and she told me it's 30 degrees with like 10-degree wind chill.
Yeah.
And so, all of those people are coming down to Florida right now. So maybe they're not as familiar with this system and they don't know, that they're
Or they're looking at the map. Where do I go? Is this my
Right.
exit? Right. Exactly. Yeah, I would imagine that's a major challenge, that transition. But I want to dig into THEA itself, the
Sure.
ownership, what you guys own, and then the projects you've done. The last 5 years, it seems like there's been an insane amount of projects. When did you join THEA? What year was it again?
2 years ago, February 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So what we're looking at now, what do you call that? The Gandy...
That's the Selmon West Extension over Gandy Boulevard.
Selmon West Extension over Gandy Boulevard. Did that come let's focus on that project first. So how does something like that come about? It's a weird idea. I mean, hey, we have a roadway that's backed up full of traffic. People commuting from St. Petersburg, crossing Gandy, hopping on the Selmon, going to Brandon, right? If you're going from St. Petersburg to Brandon across Tampa, you're trying to go through Tampa. Whose idea was that? Like, hey, let's put a road above a road, right?
Sure.
It's kind of an interesting thought.
It's actually pretty ingenious, but it's also pretty unique. I can take absolutely zero credit for it in any way.
You came maybe a little after
I
that.
came, I wasn't even here in time to cut the ribbon, which would have been the perfect thing to do, right? Like come in and cut the ribbon, but
Here I am. Yeah.
But this project was really decades in the making. I mean, so getting community buy-in, I think what THEA did on this roadway in particular, in my mind, is really a national model for how to deliver a project. So, you looked at how can I do this in a way where it's least disruptive to the community. And so this is what's called a segmental structure. And so if you look at those fin backs, they're actually what's called a catenary structure. So you look at the like the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, those types of things. So, but that's a concrete encased structure. It's got
Those actually serve a purpose?
They
That's
do.
more than cosmetic?
Yeah, it's structural.
Oh.
And so you've got this structural element. Inside of that bridge are these things called tendons, which are like a series of steel cables that are running and tightened and stressed. And then they put a wax in there and kind of grout it so that there's no air pockets, no ability for moisture to get in there.
Oh, wow.
And they're just insane in terms of the engineering of it.
Oh my gosh, I thought that was just for looks.
Which is why you've got these skinny piers and this wider bridge holding all of that structure above and below.
Yeah, when they first were constructing the piers, I thought, how's that going to hold a highway? So that's how. It really is. It's a true bridge.
It is.
It's like a suspension bridge in a way.
It really is.
Or like I don't know, that's not a suspension bridge.
No,
it's
this
like
is
the Skyway,
this is
right?
a segmental bridge.
Segmental bridge.
It's a segmental structure.
Interesting.
And so, you've got those single bridge piers, and then you've got the structure underneath, and of course the ramps. But part of the ingenious way that this project was delivered was also on the community side. So we had our communications director at the time was Sue Cherzan, and then Sally from Playbook actually developed this program called Shop Gandy, where we worked with the businesses throughout and promoted small businesses and local businesses along Gandy Boulevard.
Yeah.
While construction was happening. And
that was the fear initially from the businesses
sure.
was, well, how is this going to affect my business? I'm right here on Gandy. We're not going to be able to see the sun.
Right.
What's going to happen? Are people going to come in? That I would assume that was the biggest hurdle initially to get past, because the funding for something like that is probably easier to get than the public's opinion.
Absolutely. So, you think about us. So we're an independent special district of the state with authority to charge tolls. So we don't take any taxpayer dollars. 100% of our work is done with toll revenue off the Leroy Selmon Expressway. So we are 100% self-sufficient. And so
That's not tax money that paid for this?
no. So zero tax dollars involved in this.
Wow.
And so it was, so we set a toll rate. I go out to the financial markets and bond out that toll rate for 30 years. I get the influx of capital. We build the project now and then pay for it over the course of time with toll revenue freeing up, which is really a big part of, there's sort of several independent special district toll authorities in the state of Florida that really in many ways free up the state to be able to take those tax dollars and put them on
because
other
there's no
roads.
tax burden. That makes sense. What would other roads be, like Florida Turnpike?
Well, Florida Turnpike is, so there's several toll authorities. Florida Turnpike is a toll authority in themselves. They're part of the Department of Transportation. Then you have us, Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. You've got the Central Florida Expressway Authority around Orlando, and you've got the Greater Miami Expressway Authority down in Miami. And then there's a couple of other
There's
facilities.
one going around Lakeland too. I'm not sure exactly what
That's Florida. That's part of the Turnpike system.
Turnpike system. Okay.
And like the I-4 connector, for instance, coming out of the port, like that is a partnership between us and the Turnpike, where we get a portion of that toll revenue that comes off one of those ramps, and then the rest of it is theirs.
Fascinating. So, I mean, basically it's a loan, and then you have a monthly payment. You capture tolls to pay the monthly payment. That's a simple way to explain it, I guess.
Absolutely. We have a financial waterfall like any private corporation where, we've got debt and we manage through days cash on hand and debt service and those types of numbers. We pay our debt service, and then we have this waterfall of funding. We have bond requirements that say, okay, you've got to reserve X amount of dollars to have days cash on hand. You've got to have X amount of dollars to invest in, R&R, which is taking care of your system. And then you've got to put away X amount of dollars to continue to reinvest in the system so it runs efficiently, which is about what we're starting today.
And then going back to the relationship you had initially with businesses, I know it wasn't you, but THEA. So how did that all play out? You approached the business owners and said, look, we want to be a good neighbor. We want to help you guys.
We needed the business community buy-in. So, we had to go talk to the business community and promote that local business community at the same time that we were trying to sell the project. We needed them to be comfortable with the fact that we were going to build this project and it wasn't going to disrupt them a whole lot.
It's a hard sell.
We were going to
initially
help promote them. And so you think about the unique look and feel of that roadway. We've got to paint that picture for them. We've got to visualize that for them. And then we've got to sell them on the fact that it's going to be better when they're done. And so, for us, it was really important. And that project has been a tremendous success for the whole region. But
it really has.
But it also, has been a success for us at THEA because it was, we went into those businesses and we made promises and we're able to deliver on those promises. And, it would have been detrimental for us if we couldn't.
How does the authority work? Who owns Gandy, the street? Is that a city road? A county road?
That's a state road.
A state road. So you're working with the state, and is there some sort of permission you have to get?
Yeah. So we have an agreement with them to exist in their right of way. And it feeds up. Like, for instance, the state right now is studying an expansion of Gandy Boulevard and the bridge going into Pinellas County.
Okay.
And so it'll all kind of feed into the whole system together.
Interesting. Wow. Such a nerdy conversation, but I love it. It's so important. So you have to get with the state to get approval, but the state has an incentive to say yes because they have plans also.
Yeah, we work really closely. I mean, so for instance, we have a potential expansion project right now that we're just starting to get off the ground in southern Hillsborough County to do exactly what we did on Gandy Boulevard, all the way down the median of 301 into Riverview and Big Bend and Apollo Beach.
Oh, wow.
And so
that area needs something
tremendous growth down there.
Yeah.
And so, I personally sit down with FDOT. So the local FDOT secretary is amazing. And he sits on our board and really is a veteran in the business. And then Nicola, who runs Florida Turnpike, the three of us sat down and said, okay, this is the growth that we're seeing in this region. FDOT is focused here, Turnpike is focused here. We all can't do everything. So I said, okay, let me focus down here, and then we'll keep coming back and checking in and figure out who's best to handle this.
So is there a rendering of that online at all above 301?
We're just getting started on
Just
that
getting
one.
started on that. Gosh, if I commute all the time, Tampa to Sarasota and back, that is a real problem area.
But what we found in the initial models were that expansion would alleviate the traffic on 301 and 75.
Oh, cool. So here's the map of where it would go. So
Right.
Big Bend Road up to the Selmon extension,
Right.
or what do you call that? The Selmon Expressway.
Yeah, so that would be what it's two. It's the Selmon Expressway, but it's also the reversible express lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got those two systems. We've got the upper deck and the lower deck coming out of Brandon. You know, we just opened a very simple project on the reversible express lanes that day one had 300 less cars downtown.
Wow.
And so, you know, so historically, if you're coming from Brandon and going, let's say you're coming from Brandon and going to McDill, you get a choice. You can get on the local lanes and go all the way through, or you can get on the reversible express lane, which is still, to me, the best view I've seen in Tampa.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
You get up on that
Yeah.
upper deck.
We look like a real big city from that angle.
Right. But if you're on that upper deck, historically, you'd have to get off downtown at Meridian and you'd have to navigate back through Cumberland and Bahrain and either jump back on the expressway. But the problem that we were seeing was too many cars were staying on Bayshore.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want that traffic on Bayshore. So what we did was we created two new ramps. So one out there towards the end, you can kind of jump on, jump off. But now, if you're coming in from Brandon, right around IKEA, you can jump back. There's a little slip ramp that you can jump back on the mainline expressway and not go downtown.
That's perfect. Is there a relationship, I'm sure there is, with the city, where the city comes to you and says, look, Bayshore Boulevard, first of all, notoriously dangerous. People treat that like a racetrack. It's pretty horrible. There's been some tragic fatalities on that road since I was little, and I'm sure before that. We've since installed stoplights at, I think, El Prado or Euclid, Rome Avenue. Does the city come to you and say, look, too many of people that are using the expressway get off, get on Bayshore, speed to McDill or wherever, and then almost pitch to you like, look, something needs to be done? Is that a conversation at all?
Yeah, partially. So, you know, one of the things that I see in Tampa that is really working well is everybody seems to be working as a team.
Yeah.
And so, you know, historically, years ago, we started to see that very problem. We started to see people over on Bayshore, too much traffic on Bayshore. And then we realized that some of that was base traffic coming to McDill really from Brandon. So to alleviate that, we created a toll discount program for McDill Base, Air Force
awesome.
Base. And so, you know, then you kind of push that traffic back over and you kind of keep it on the expressway because that's where we want it.
So it's not all about building another lane or a new ramp or a new road. There's other creative little ways you can pull traffic off of the local lanes.
There are ways that you can meter traffic. There are ways that you can manage it. It's really about managing it to an efficient way. I mean, you think about the amount of capital expansion and the amount of capital reconstruction that we've got over the next 10 to 15 years. In 15 years, including the expansion into southern Hillsborough County, the expressway will be brand new.
Wow.
And so, you know, built late 60s, early 70s, like much of the interstate system across this country, which is why you see all this construction everywhere, is you've got to rebuild it all at the same time. It was all kind of built at the same time. So, you know, we're starting on the south side. And so our next project, which is probably going to hit the street before the end of this fiscal year, essentially will rebuild the expressway from the Hillsborough River Bridge around Convention Center all the way to Gandy. And so we're going to do a couple of things there. So one is we're going to reconstruct that roadway. We're going to add a lane in each direction. So there'll be another lane. We're going to fix some of our merge areas. One of the challenges that we have on the expressway are we have really short merge areas. And so if you're getting on or off, you know,
Willow's a problem.
Yeah, want, if you're getting on the expressway, we want to give them enough space to get up to speed. And sometimes we have merge areas that are really short.
Yeah, one I'm thinking of, the one downtown, you hop on Borean Street. Is that it? That's a quick, you know, you got to look, cars are zooming.
Bro Rain, you know, you come up on Morgan.
Yeah.
And then you've got to kind of jump left and get on there. And it's a really short area.
Yep.
And it's around a curve, so it's particularly challenging. And then kind of the next one up will be Tampa Street, which is a little bit easier, but still very kind of short area.
Cars were a lot slower back then too. The performance of vehicles has changed highways.
Sure.
Like back then in the 1960s when they built the original crosstown, cars couldn't do what they could do today.
No,
So you're probably changing for performance too.
You are, and you're changing, you got new technology out there. You've got all kinds of engineering advancements. The other thing that I think is, I don't want to say it's inconsequential, but I think it's going to separate us a little bit, is we're going to take that blue and white look and feel of that structure on Gandy Boulevard and carry that through the entire expressway. So you're going to see those aesthetic features, but we're also putting the same focus on our underpasses. And so, if you think about the expressway through South Tampa, if you're either in a neighborhood and going under the expressway to Bayshore, or you're on Bayshore going under the expressway into the neighborhood. So we want to create those underpasses to be gateways into those communities.
I really wanted to talk to you about that.
Sure.
And I was trying to figure out a way to ask the question without being offensive, but the nature of a highway is ugly. It's concrete, it's big, it's in the middle of a city. How do you combat that while effectively moving people around? The reality is we have to have a highway. You got to, there's evacuation reasons, there's traffic reasons, et cetera.
It serves a vital purpose. I mean, it's not only people getting to work or their day-to-day travel, it's that package that you're waiting for. It's everything.
Yeah.
So it serves a really valuable purpose. And so my personal approach on this over the course of my 30-year career has been very simple. You have to make the community the centerpiece of what you're doing and not the highway the centerpiece of what you're doing. And that highway has to facilitate the community and the people that are using it. So if you start with the community and figure out how to build it in a way where you're connecting communities and you're connecting people and you're creating accessibility, then you can do it in a very different way. This graphic on this screen is a great example. So, when we're done South Selmon construction, this is where Beta Bay Boulevard goes under the expressway. In the shade of the expressway, we're building 2 dog parks, some pickleball courts, and electric vehicle charging. We're creating community spaces, places for farmers markets, those types of things in that space. So, you can do a few different things, and we're doing that. We have a master plan to do this very thing all the way through downtown where the Leroy Selmon Greenway is today.
Amazing.
And so you talk about communities on either side of the expressway. If you very intentionally think about how you connect to communities on either side by utilizing the space under the expressway, you can really do things in a very different way. And so, you think about like where our headquarters is, we've got a great dog park out on the back of our headquarters. So that space between there and over towards like 12th Street and Channel Side, those are really long, straight bridges,
right?
Which create a ton of space. So we've got
precious shade too.
Oh, absolutely! You learn really quickly that shade is a commodity in Florida.
That's right.
So what happens is we've laid out a master plan where we're reimagining, the old stormwater management pond with a fence around it to be more of a community-based water feature. How do we take the Greenway on the other side of the reversible and connect it around 4 green fields and come back to it? How do you create spaces under the expressway for active uses? How do you utilize that space in a community-focused way?
This is fantastic.
And so if you go one block further where, Daryl Shaw and his group are doing the development on the waterfront, and then you go under the expressway and you're into Ybor. How do you transition from that space all the way into Ybor very seamlessly? You do it by working together and thinking about what the community needs.
Yeah.
East Selmon, we've got a really cool concept that we're working with some local companies on where, underpass lighting that also has Wi-Fi. So you'd be able to get Wi-Fi under the expressway,
awesome
those types of things.
Yeah, you want to be a good neighbor, right? For so many decades, the highway was just this stark concrete thing in every American city. So this is what we're looking at as the master plan for the Selmon Greenway.
Yeah.
I'm seeing pickleball, table tennis, dog parks, walking paths, bike trails. I mean, This is incredible. How far away is this from reality?
So we just got the master plan approved a few months ago. We're looking at a couple of concepts on how to do chunks of it at a time. because it's not a toll part of our facility. We have to use it in the lowest waterfall of our finances in terms of we've met all our other requirements in that capital investment. If it's part of something on the tollway, then you can do it a little bit differently. But we're also actually have a plan where we've already applied for 2 or 3 federal grants to implement some of this. The Reconnecting Community grants are great for that. Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool grant programs out there in the infrastructure bill that are great for these types of things. And we can bring some of our capital and then stretch it. But you think about these areas.
You got to bring some of that federal money home. Yeah. Greg. Come on, man.
But you think about these areas and incorporating things like spaces for food trucks. And,
right.
It's
a part of the city.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a barrier. You shouldn't have to feel like, oh, well, I really want to Uber. I don't want to go from Channelside to Ybor. You should feel like it's one fluid distance. And this is a way to accomplish that.
I really believe it is. And then it's about connectivity. How do we connect to the Riverwalk? We're doing that through Fry Park. But also, so the challenge that I've given our organization is that we have served this community for 60 years. The next 60 years, I want us to be integrated and part of the community with the services that we're delivering. And so that's just a different mindset, and it's a different way of kind of doing business. So
it really is. And it's not the way a majority of the public thinks about the highway system. There's negative connotations around it for really good reasons. Like I said, they're concrete, they're big, they're noisy, there's traffic. A lot of people's most stressful part of their day is on a highway system.
Sure.
How do you balance that out and make it a more enjoyable experience for not only the people using the highway, maybe they're cutting through Tampa, but also now that Tampa is not just a drive-through downtown, it's a destination downtown.
Right.
This is such a big part of that. I'm so glad that this was on the radar.
It's really a cool way that we're envisioning, and we've got really good partners in this region. FDOT does a great job. The city's working really closely with us. The county's working really closely with us. Because at the end of the day, the people that use our system, the people that we serve, they don't know for the most part, and don't care who owns the road that they're on.
Right.
They want to get to where they want to get to, and they expect us and FDOT and the city and the county to all work together to help them get there. And that's what's happening. So FDOT serves on our board as well, and they're doing some really cool things too.
Absolutely. Amazing. So the master plan has been approved. Is there a time projection you could give for completion?
We're going through our budget process now. So, the goal is to make continual investment over the next 10 years in those underpass pieces. So the next one, the first piece that you'll probably see is right around USF and Camels, where we're going to kind of recreate some spaces there. We're actually going to create, so it was a really cool environment there where Expressway gets a little bit low and then there's kind of these hills. So we found a space over by USF Camels that's like a quiet space under the Expressway. So what we're going to do there is actually create an area where, like an outdoor meeting space, where we'll put AV technology in there. Like you can plug your mic in and do a community meeting under the Expressway.
How cool is that?
And then really like biohabitats and gardens and those types of things on top of pickleball courts and places for food trucks and dog parks.
Look at that. Really disruption, right? Like cutting straight through the middle of a city. What a challenge that is. But I think as that project gets going and people start using it, they'll actually see the Selmon Greenway as like, wow, I'm so glad that this highway runs through our urban core. Look at the value it has.
I believe so. And you can see it through the data in terms of the property values around close access to the Expressway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, we're trying in many ways to redefine an urban expressway by creating those spaces and creating that community-based feel, that customer-based feel, and really rethink the way an urban expressway exists in a downtown environment. And that means looking at where people are going and where they're coming from and where they can access and where we can safely put a ramp and where we shouldn't have a ramp and how do we reimagine the spaces under the expressway. It's unique because it's all structure. It's all bridge structure. So you've got...
But you know what though? Like we said, in Florida, that's actually an advantage.
Absolutely.
Whereas in Boston with the big dig, right, their solution was, well, let's just bury the expressway and then do green space on top. That ended up costing what, 10 times what it was supposed to. It took like 2 decades. But you go there now. I was in Boston last year with my mom for Mother's Day. Beautiful city. First time going. Amazing. Loved it. And the area where that highway is buried is awesome. It's a transition from kind of the old town of Boston to the more modern area. There's a park. People are hanging out outside. So in the same way, without going through the process of burying the Selmon Expressway, you can really accomplish the same thing.
Make it part of the community.
Yeah.
You know, we have this kind of running joke in the Expressway, and kind of this little bit of a dream where, like, when Monday Night Football comes or the World Series comes or something, you know, we want that Hillsborough River Bridge with that great aesthetic lighting piece to be
Right.
kind of the piece that they see. But you're seeing more attention to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can get everything in this region. I mean, if you like the beach, you can go to
Oh
the
my
beach.
God,
If you
yeah.
want downtown, you want
Yeah.
the best restaurants.
Yeah. It's no wonder why people want to move here. It's fabulous, right?
It's an amazing city.
In so many ways. You're close to the beach. We have an amazing city, so much to do. It's beautiful. You can't stop people from moving here, but we can certainly plan better for the future.
Well, I found too, and you know, being kind of a newbie to Florida, you know, 2 years in, everyone is really welcoming. You know, they're welcoming not only to me personally and my family, but also, you know, what kind of ideas can you bring, and how can we work together, and how can we solve some of these challenges?
Well, I think that's a reflection of you too. You're really passionate about.
I love what I do.
Yeah, you really do. And it sounds like the people you work with also love what they do. And I
They
think
do.
that's encouraging for people to hear because, again, when they think of a highway, it's like this big evil thing that causes problems. But you've made it clear today that it really doesn't have to be.
You know, I try to tell this story a little bit too, where if you think about what we're doing and how we're rebuilding the expressway for where Tampa is headed, not where they're going, where they've been, you know, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, whoever that mayor is, whoever those community leaders are, if they're asked a question, you know, who was really an instrumental part of the success of downtown Tampa that you wouldn't think about? I want them to say the Expressway Authority, because nobody's thinking about that. And we can play such a critical role by not essentially doing all kinds of other work than expressways, but we can also just be at the table and help with that community development. You do this, I'll do this. Let's work together. Let's create this space for the community. And let's create an area where this community and the amazing things that are happening in this community are the focal point of what we're doing. The expressway is part of that facilitation.
Absolutely.
But it can't be, the expressway can't be the centerpiece of downtown.
No, but it certainly looks like it is. When you look at that aerial view,
Sure. You look at those old pictures, you know, from where it was to everything densifying around it.
well, I think you've made it clear today too that it's not just serving one purpose. It's not just to get people from A to B. It's a lot more than that.
It's a lot more than that.
And as much as I'm so pro other forms of transportation, like we talked about before we went live, it's what our generation wants. We really want a more walkable lifestyle. We don't want to spend our lives in cars. We want a trolley extension. We want more bike lanes, all of that sort of stuff. We also need to recognize that we do need highways. We need highways for evacuations, for hurricanes. We need highways for commuters. There's a lot of people that live east of Tampa that work in St. Pete and vice versa. How are you going to get people across the bridge like that in an effective manner without a highway system? You have to have it.
You know, one of the things that we've done over the last year is we took a step back and really looked hard at the growth that's happening in this region and where it's happening. That's where the 301 project came from. But what we found was growth was happening in really 3 different buckets. One is north of the city, kind of Pasco County area, tremendous growth up there. Growth in southern Hillsborough County, a lot of it has to do with available housing and costs and those types of things. You're moving into the region. But we're also seeing huge growth in the connection of the economies between Tampa and St. Pete. So more and more people are living in St. Pete and working in Tampa, or living in Tampa and working in St. Pete. So we're seeing that cross-functional traffic two-way. So if you earlier we talked about our traffic growth being 19-20% over where we were pre-pandemic. That growth is almost exclusively in the middle of the day.
Wow.
So it's not morning peak, it's not evening peak, it's middle of the day. So what we're starting to see is this settling of the travel in the region. So how much of the growth in the region is a work from home, and I can go to Home Depot at 11 o'clock, or, you know, those types of things.
Right.
that are not in the 9 to 5 commute.
The changing lifestyle too of this country, people working from home, that probably plays a role, because for so long it was all about the morning rush and the afternoon rush. So now I would imagine you're focusing on lightning game, midday traffic, right? It's not just those 2 periods of time where you have an influx.
Right. So we have transitioned over the last probably 3 years from what was historically a commuter roadway to a vital artery all day in the city.
3 years is so quick.
Oh, in a second. And so that's one of the challenging pieces that we have today. When I started in this business, you do 25, 30-year traffic models and you were pretty accurate. Our planning horizon today is maybe 5 years.
Right. I was going to ask that too. Like, how are you guys really projecting anything? COVID changed so much in terms of how we live, how we work, but it also changed, I think, the trajectory of the population of Florida. Like, we took growth of, like you said, till 2030 and condensed it down into a few years. Now, when you look at projections, how can you be accurate? It's probably hard to tell.
It's really tough. You've got to factor in the technology as well. The more connected and autonomous vehicle technology out there, they'll manage that system. But at the same time, you look at the downtown core. How much of those people that are living in downtown? How many of those people maybe not use their car during the week? Maybe they're going to live downtown. They work from home. Maybe they live downtown. Maybe they walk to work. Walk to lunch, which is the lifestyle that I think this younger generation that's coming into the city is really looking for. How can I, and I think a lot of people love kind of living and working in 3 or 4 or 5 block radius. You just kind of live your life. It's
fantastic. And you know what? You go to Water Street, which is a great example of a development that came from the ashes of the industrial, dirt pit that was that South Channel side area. And it's insane the amount of people that are there on a daily basis, getting lunch, enjoying the weather, shopping. I mean, there's a lot of people. You feel like you're in a real big city in Water Street.
And so you think about all of them, and I'll try and name some of them, but I'll probably forget 1 or 2. But if you think about Armature Works, down to Sparkman Wharf, down to Channelside, to Water Street, and now over to Gasworks in Ybor and the redevelopment of that waterfront. Like, the waterfront to me was like the last piece, like that piece that what was going to happen there. And it just creates a really cool environment to try and think about this new playing field and how we can be part of it.
And so much more to come too. This rendering is Studio HB. Frank DiGiacomo, he's been on the podcast a few times. This is his company. They've taken a rendering of all the projects, or most of them you can, in the urban core, and put them on one sheet. You can really get a sense of scale and what's happening in Tampa. And, it shows Gasworks, Ybor Harbor, and Port Tampa had some ideas a while back. I don't know if they've abandoned those or not, but the point is there's a massive level of growth. We know it's happening. And then the question is, how do you plan for it?
And you look at the Expressway. I mean, the Expressway right is so close to Ybor Harbor that you can't even see it behind those buildings.
Right. And then that's going to be probably another project you guys do, is how do we get traffic exiting right there efficiently versus going through, I guess Kennedy would now be the exit you would take, or 21st. There's another one there.
Yeah, 22nd, and then, you can kind of go down Adamo on the backside there.
But again, that'll be a future conversation, I'm sure. Let's bounce. I don't know how much time you have. Could we talk Meridian and then Whiting and all the connectivity that's happening really immediately, right? This is all in the next few years.
Yeah. So if you think about what we have in front of us, the first project that we'll see is that reconstruction of the Hillsborough River Bridge all the way down to Gandy Boulevard. We've got another project that we've got 2 other projects that are just coming to the end of their planning process that will be ready on the shelf to go. One is doing the same thing from 22nd Street out to Brandon, adding another lane in each direction, reconstructing that, focusing on some underpasses, those types of things. Then we've got Whiting, which is really the first of our downtown projects. What Whiting is going to do is it's going to take away that spur ramp around the arena, 6A, and it's going to create a better merge there. So Whiting, that 6 ramp is a great example of the short planning horizon. So original plans were to elongate that ramp all the way through, create this bigger ramp downtown. We've decided to wait on that. Let's see how the growth pans out. We don't want to, you can't unbuild something big, right? So you want to let it pan out a little bit, see if we need to add that elongation. But then creating a new connection, which is a new Whiting ramp that's going to come down right by the parking garage that you see. And you see that coming around kind of Nebraska, really kind of feeding there. And then Nebraska will kind of loop around to Findlay. But what this is going to do is create an environment where you're going to have a stop condition and several four-way stops, not only at Meridian, but at Brush and at where it hits the new Whiting by the garage. So you have people that are coming for the Lightning game. They're in that garage. They're not navigating all the city streets. They're jumping off the expressway. They're getting in the garage.
Which is a big problem now. I mean, when those Lightning games, and there might not ever be a situation where the traffic is flowing and flowing and flowing. The reality is there's tens of thousands of people trying to move it all at one time.
Right. So if you're coming into downtown for a Lightning game, you're going to jump off ramp 6B. You're going to go to that parking garage, and then you're going to walk the Leroy Selmon Greenway all the way to the arena. And so, it creates this kind of, it's got a right turn there. And then what you see on the right-hand side of that as part of the roadway footprint is a two-way elevated cycle track that's going to connect over to the Greenway as well as the Meridian Greenway.
Now explain that again. Exactly where will that go?
So you see it on the right-hand side of the road. So you see...
Yeah, where am I looking here?
You see...
Right-hand side of Whiting?
Yeah, so you see one lane going here.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yes.
This is a two-way elevated cycle track. And so what that does is it keeps the pedestrians in a place...
Elevated threw me off. So
sidewalk height.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So when you...
I was thinking bridge or something. Yeah.
The research is showing that when those are sidewalk height, they're a safer environment.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think it's the state or the county that owns Dale Mabry, and they put bike lanes there. Mm-hmm. Like if you're on a bike on Dale Mabry, that's kind of a death wish. It's a little silly for them to do that. This is a much smarter, long-sighted idea. Hey, protect cyclists. Duh,
it does,
right?
And it's dedicated space. And so what that does is it creates a safe space for those travelers. And that's, not just a bike lane. You get on a scooter. We're seeing more and more e-bikes in the city.
Right.
But at the same time, what that also does is it eliminates them from conflicts around the ramps. And so, from our standpoint, if we can keep them away from the ramps, it's a much safer area.
For everyone, yeah.
For everyone.
Right. And then also, too, I'm sure Brush will continue south as Water Street expands north.
Yeah, so we're working very closely with SPP on kind of implementing that grid in the city. Because if you look, the other thing there is, so you see this green area, and actually this is pretty up to date because the railroad tracks are gone, and we just pulled them out and put that grass in. And so all of that green space where you see that curvature that goes up towards ramp 6B and that green space and all the green space on the other side of Whiting, we own all that property. And so, we've just...
Including Meridian Avenue.
Including Meridian Avenue. And so what we've just done is we've concluded a study with Ernst & Young, the Infrastructure Advisory and Real Estate Advisory Group, in what potential paths that we could take with that. At THEA, I can't be a developer. But what we want is what's best for this city and how we can create the right environment for that. So we think it's going to be really cool.
Would that include selling parcels or partnering with a developer?
It could.
Interesting.
Could. So, you could. So you think about the real estate portfolio that THEA currently has. We own that property, but we also own where our building is and all of that property around Channelside across from Publix.
Acres and acres.
Acres and acres. So, we want what is best for this city. What is the highest and best use for that?
And those conversations, is that with city government, local large-scale developers? I mean, all across the board.
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far yet. So we just kind of did this study to inform us and our board on what potential paths. And what it came to, very similar to what Water Street has done there. But it's also, taking different paths like ground lease, or do we want to sell the property? Do we want to find partnerships? Is there a P3 environment? Those types of things. So
interesting.
We're just starting to kind of get a little bit more informed on that so that we can make the right decisions. But it's critical. We've created all that green space. Now we just pulled the railroad tracks up and put some turf down.
You can really see the scale of the ownership of THEA. Yeah. Tyler, can you go one slide back, slide 13, just to get a scale for people listening? All where the railroad tracks are on the right-hand side, where A is.
That's all gone.
It's a lot of property. I mean, there's quite an opportunity for THEA and the city and maybe a developer to figure out something.
And it's all part of our history too, where it's like, we put a historical designation up so you can see some of the historical designations around the old flour mill and some of the original owners. We just put that up there now. But the reason we acquired that property is so that we could expand Meridian, because the reversible express lane was dumping all the traffic downtown. And so the agreement that we had with the city was, hey, if we do this, then when Ardent Mills relocates to a better location for them, then we'll help the city reconnect that grid. So we're working very closely with them on doing that. And that partnership is 20 years old.
Right. Yeah, that also changed kind of the use of the roadways too. I mean, when the mill was there, that was trucks moving in downtown, large semis. Now you just don't have that.
You don't.
So that's changed as well.
That's changed.
Fantastic. So many exciting things happening. I'm especially excited for the Greenway. I think that is such a compliment to our urban core, and really will connect right now Water Street. It is kind of a dead zone between Water Street and downtown proper, the CBD. But once that Greenway is in place, maybe you walk there, hang out for a little bit, connect to Wi-Fi, meet with someone, and then continue walking. Like, it really is a nice halfway point in between those urban neighborhoods.
Part of the community. And so, you think about what we're doing is, we've got, including the expansion into Southern Hillsborough County, about a $3 billion investment to make in the city, into the system. And so that is expanding the expressway, that is reconstructing, but it's also reimagining those underspaces and implementing the next generation technology and intelligence in the system. Our variable right now that we're really trying to get a hold of is time, right? Is that a 10-year project? Is it a 12-year project? Is it a 15-year project? Last year, we closed out last year at about $120 million in toll revenue. Our new projections are probably around 130 for the year, for next year. We're continuing to grow. We're starting to see the growth level off a little bit. It's not as aggressive as it's been the last few years.
Right.
You think about, we've probably broken daily transaction records 8 or 9 times in the last 2 years. But last year we broke several in February. This year it took till March till we broke the first one. And so it's just starting to level off a little bit, but we're still seeing tremendous growth.
That's amazing. Well, Greg, I really appreciate you coming on. This was an awesome conversation. Your passion shines through. It really does. And I love the fact that you're so community focused. I think that's awesome.
We have to be.
I think you want to be a good neighbor.
We want to be a good neighbor. We want to be part of the community, but we also feel pretty strongly that we can redefine what an expressway authority in an urban core can be. Absolutely.
Okay, everyone. Appreciate you listening. I think THEA is on Instagram, no? Yeah, follow THEA. What's the handle? At THEA Selmon. And then, guys, hop on that expressway. Spend some toll money. We need to get this thing implemented as soon as possible. So take the expressway, guys. All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you guys for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like it. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Give us a comment. Give us some feedback. We want to know how we're doing. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.